Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the 46th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. I'm Marta, your host, a psychic medium, angel card reader, and a spiritual teacher, and I am so deeply honored to be sharing this sacred space with you today. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notification bell so you never miss a conversation. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I would be so grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps us reach and uplift even more beautiful souls. Today's episode holds deep emotion, healing, and soul purpose. It's about what happens when your entire world shifts in a moment, when grief arrives without warning, and you find yourself walking a path you never expected, but one that ultimately leads to light, transformation, and purpose. Our guest today is someone who has walked that path. Julie Bilboe-Crane is an experienced nurse lecturer and executive coach with 37 years in healthcare. For the past 2 decades, she has focused primarily on teaching pre-registration and postgraduate nursing students. Until January 2020, Julie was following a traditional academic path. She had been a university head of department and was preparing to begin the final stage of her PhD at Lancaster University. But everything changed when her daughter Mary Lou died suddenly and unexpectedly from meningoencephalitis at the age of 22. She had been previously well, and the loss was a devastating shock. Amidst the grief and chaos, Julie found a deck of tarot cards beside Mary Lou's bed, and that moment marked the beginning of a different journey. Over 2020 and 2021, Julie began learning to use the cards to connect with Mary Lou and trained as a tarot reader herself. Since then, Julie has retrained as an executive coach, bringing tarot, sound healing, and yoga nidra into her toolkit, the very practices that helped her survive grief, and now the ones she uses to support others through life transitions. She's also the founder of Mary's Place, a nonprofit that supports newly qualified professionals, especially nurses and teachers, as they move from student to professional. Mary's Place offers well-being retreats, group sessions, and one-on-one coaching to help them thrive, not just survive. Julie, welcome to the podcast. I am truly honored to have you here.
Thank you so much, Marta. It's an absolute delight to be here. So thank you for having me on the show.
I am very excited because I never know where spirit is going to take us with that conversation, but I think this is what makes it very magical and special. Julie, I would love to start by honoring your journey and your daughter's Marilou's life. Would you be willing to share a little bit who she was and what she was like as a daughter and a soul?
I'd love to, actually, because sort of two things. Actually, listening to you sort of introduce me makes me realise, oh my goodness, so much really, really has changed since she died. I feel like I'm at the space where you sort of take things a little bit for granted. So it was kind of quite nice to reflect back on that. And I find I talk a lot about what happened when Mary Lou died. So it's really, really nice to be able to talk about her as a person, as what she was like here when she was on Earth. So, God, where to start with that? So I'm going to work backwards a little bit, actually. So she was 22 when she died. She was a really lively soul. She and I had good fun. We also had little arguments as well. Less so as she got into her 20s. That was more of a feature of her teenage years, really. And I think it was just, she was really feisty, knew what she wanted, a real strong drive for life. Where at the time that she died, she just graduated from her law degree at Sheffield University. In fact, that was just 6 years ago, like sort of just very, very, very recently. And she'd gone back to Sheffield to do a master's degree in political theory. And that's really inspired me in my journey in many ways, because she was properly starting to find her voice. And it was wonderful to watch that. She crafted a few posts for Facebook that was sort of getting into that kind of political nature and really sort of testing herself and her thought processes and being prepared to put herself out there, which was lovely to watch. Because when she was a little girl, she was really shy. She was painfully shy at times, and that caused some challenges in itself. And I wish now, with hindsight, that I'd just let her be more of herself. If I've got any kind of reflections around that at all, it's, do you know what? Sometimes we're better off just letting our kids be the way that they are. Do not try and make them to conform into some kind of mold. So yeah, so she's a shy little girl, but actually, as she grew through sort of primary school and in high school, had a really lovely circle of friends. Gorgeous boyfriend that she'd been with for 8 years when she died. So that was like an extra sort of devastation as well, because of course they'd had plans for what their life would have been together. And that all sort of changed in an instant. So yeah, in a nutshell, she was feisty, she was good fun, very, very loving, and such a good friend to everybody who knew her. What I learned a lot about her actually after she died. A lot of her friends, many of her friends were at university, not all of them, but many of them were, and they'd very often contact her for help with their assignments, regardless of what the topic area was. But she was good at English, she was good at writing, and she liked to help people.
I love it. Thank you.
A really nice energy. If although I didn't really use that language when she was around, I wasn't in that. But when I look back now, yeah, she really was a pretty special soul, really.
And I'm sure you'll agree that she still is. I'm now curious about her beautiful soul on the other side, and how has your relationship with her evolved, and has she been is she still like testing you? Is she very opinionated from the other side? I'm curious about your communication or anything that you've experienced since she has crossed over.
Yeah, no, and again, thank you for asking. It's something I do love to talk about. I know the overriding thing is that, no, we don't have any arguments anymore. She's actually really, really supportive. I've had some really tremendous experiences, which, bearing in mind this time 6 years ago, I didn't not understand this world, this sort of psychic world. And I would have perhaps I had seen psychics and I'd seen tarot readers and stuff, but it was very much on the fringes of, I didn't really understand anything. And if pushed, then I was a bit skeptical as well, just sort of thinking, well, we will see. But the stuff that's happened to me since Mary Lou's died, it's that kind of weird thing of, once you've experienced something, and I've seen her, I've heard her, and I've felt her, and I can't not have those experiences. So that's sort of totally changed my mindset about all this, even though I don't understand it. So yeah, in terms of seeing her, that was probably the first thing that happened, and it was quite early days. So I remember when it first started happening, and I was actually, because again, I was very logical at this point, or much more logical than I am now, sort of trying to work out, how is this happening? Am I just sort of piecing together old photographs and seeing an image of it in front of my face when I choose to? Because that's sort of what it felt like. And then I had an experience. I astral traveled without knowing what astral travel was. I just had this really weird experience that frightened the life out. Well, I say it frightened the life out of me. It didn't. I was a little bit scared, but I was more curious. And after that episode happened, I literally wrote it word for word, my quick memory in my notes in my phone, and sent it to a friend who's a medium, and just said, like, what's just happened to me? And it was her who told me about astral travel. So when I looked up astral travel, it made complete sense. That's exactly what had happened. And interestingly, it had happened because I'd woken up in the middle of the night, couldn't get back to sleep. So popped on a little meditation to try and help me get back to sleep. And of course, for those of you who know about astral travel, one of the key ways to be able to do this is to sort of early hours of the morning, get yourself into a meditative state, and maybe you'll drift off. So without me planning to, that's exactly what happened. And during that astral travel experience, I saw her then very, very clearly. And it's as if, so my interpretation of that was that she was on the other side, obviously. And it's as if she was welcoming, I felt like she was welcoming children who were coming across to the other side. And I could hear her really clearly. And she said, sometimes it can feel a bit mum, and sometimes it can feel a bit dad. And she just kind of looked at me as if to say, I'm busy. Like, what are you doing here disturbing me? And then when I kind of came back from the travel situation, if you like, whatever the words are for that, I then just saw her like absolutely vividly. So all those almost like kaleidoscope pictures that I'd mentioned in the beginning that had been sort of trying to come together suddenly came together in a way that I just knew. I knew that I'd just seen her without any doubt at all. And then in terms of feeling her, again, that was in bed one night, and I thought my husband had reached over and given me a hug in the middle of the night, which frankly would have been a bit weird because he likes his sleep, so that would have been unusual. And I sort of lay there feeling the hug. I had my back to him thinking, that's nice, okay, strange, but okay. And then I turned over and he was facing the other way, and I'd not felt him move, and I thought, I don't think that was you, actually. I think that was something else. And then I lay there again and I felt it again, because I was a bit more aware of things this next time. I felt it again, really purposely, if you like. And I knew Chris hadn't moved. And I just took, although I couldn't see it, I just kind of knew. It's one of those things, well, you'll know, as I mean, you just know, don't you? You know when sometimes you've had a bit of an experience that's probably nothing. But when you know that you've had something, then you know. So therefore, I mean, there's been loads, but they're the two that I think of most fondly, because they were quite in the early days, so they were really, really reassuring. What I get now more is I do get signs. I've not had as much lately, if I'm honest, but I'm kind of okay with that, because I know that if I need to call her in, then she'll give me a sign of some description. I get quite a lot in number sequences, so I will have a spell of looking at number plates and those kind of talking to me. And then if I want to connect with her directly, I do that via the cards. So that was how the whole card thing started. I've got a lovely little note.
Tell us about the cards. Yes, because you found them beside her bed after her passing. Could you talk about this, and then your story with tarot deck and reading tarot?
Yeah, definitely. It's really strange. So with Mary Lou, I mean, you said that she had meningoencephalitis, which she did, and that sort of all started. She had all within the space of a week, and I was actually on holiday for the most part of that. So it was just in terms of stress, it just added this to the stress levels kind of thing. But so when she did die, eventually she was in intensive care, and when we came home from the hospital, I remember being in the hospital and thinking, oh my God, I'll have to go into a bedroom at some point, and I really don't want to do it. And I was really building up in my mind, thinking, I don't want that. How am I going to do this? That's her space. Oh my God, and all those awful, awful, awful thoughts. So as soon as we got back from the hospital, I just kind of took a deep breath and walked straight in and thought, I've just got to do it. And the first thing I saw was a deck of tarot cards next to her bed. Little purple box. If I'd have thought it through, they're in a bit of a weird place at the minute, but I should have got them out to show you, really. But they were there, and I couldn't take my eyes off them, because at this point I was the kind of person who I'd been to tarot readers, and I'd been to one earlier on that year, so I wasn't offended or particularly frightened or anything like that. But equally, going back a few years previously, when friends have invited mediums round to their house, like for little sort of get-togethers and stuff, I would go to that thing, for an evening. I would never have had somebody like that in my house, just out of fear, just sort of like just not being all this is about. So that was my mentality at the time. Suddenly, this deck of tarot cards is next to her bed, and she's not there. So that freaked me out a little bit. Wonder where all this was, where it was coming from, where it was going, etc. And obviously there were loads of other things to do, so it didn't take up lots of my headspace, in all fairness. I later found out that a university friend had bought them for Christmas, which made complete sense, because we'd had a lovely Christmas. Chris and I had then gone on holiday, and then before we'd come back, she'd gone to intensive care, so we'd not had time to talk about Christmas presents. So at least it sort of solved the mystery. then over the course of that year, so I remember it so vividly, in May of that year, because of course I'm having to try and figure out what to do with her things. I'm still figuring that bit out now. And I remember just sort of picking this deck of cards up and thinking, I know nothing about them. And I opened it and I thought, I don't understand why some cards have got like one word, like justice or temperance, and other cards are Ace of Pentacles or Queen of Swords. Like, what on earth does this mean? And I remember like laying out a little sheet. It was one of her sheets from when she was a baby, funnily enough. I lay it on the floor in her bedroom, put 3 cards out, and my iPhone literally spoke to me. The screen went, I think it was a white screen with red and black white writing, and it spoke, and it just said, virus alert, virus alert. So I turned the phone off. I just knew intuitively that I shouldn't be looking at the cards. I just thought, this is not for me. Put them away, turned the phone back on about an hour later. It worked completely normally, no problem at all. And I just took it as just leave them, don't touch them. Then over the course of that year, I saw another couple of mediums or psychics, and they were, without me mentioning anything about the cards, they were telling me that I should be doing this. So I can't remember when the shift actually happened, but for my little notebook, which again I can't quite see, it's here somewhere, I'd made a note on the 29th of December 2020 that I'd been playing with Mary Lou's cards for a couple of weeks, and I felt like I was starting to get messages from her. And I would literally at that point, I would just draw a card and look up the meaning in the book, and probably draw. I didn't even know what a spread was or anything. I just draw a few cards, and my little notes are just lovely, really. I was just getting so much reassurance from that. And then, as often happens when you're thinking about things, suddenly a Facebook ad arrived with a tarot course with a guy called Richard Knight. So I joined that in February. And joined his academy, I think, in April. And then I did my first paid reading in June of that year, which was just like, oh my God, how the hell did that happen? And in between that, so what I did do, that sounded like very, very dramatic. In terms of my own training, I did a lot of free readings. There's a group called Biddy Tarot, and she's based in Australia. And in fact, it was her deck of cards that was Mary Lou's original deck. And I don't know whether the service still exists or not, but there was a service where I could pay to be a reader. People then requested readings, but you get the written request in, you do your written reading, or you can do a voice reading, but I mostly did written readings and send them back in exchange for a review. So the first time I did that, because I don't know if your readings for friends, obviously, but that's different because you know them. So it's, I loved the Biddy Tarot thing because this was also testing not just me out, but testing the process out as well. So if I could get an email in from somebody anywhere in the world claiming to be male, female, this age, that age, the other age, claiming to ask about their love life or their work life, I pull some cards, answer their question, and they write back saying, 5 stars. That was amazing. Thank you so much. You've really helped me. It's almost addictive. I did over 150 readings and got mostly 5-star readings, which was just, it was helpful to me to know that there definitely is some magic in this. It's not just about reading the room and reading the person. Of course, that's helpful too, to be able to get on board with your clients. So I now work more in a coaching capacity really than a fortune telling capacity. But to me, that early experience gave me the confidence to know there is some magic in this. It's yeah, I loved it. So a bit of a long story. I hope that.
No, I love it. But I have one question. Do you think that perhaps it was Mary Lou who has, or her soul that left that tarot deck for you, or anyone from the spirit world? You'll be able to answer best to this question, in order to help you to navigate the grief in those early days? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've not thought about it in that language before, because again, being really practical, I know where they came from. I know exactly which friend bought them for her for Christmas. But the fact that they were by her bed and just totally in my eye line, that has not escaped my notice, if you like, and it has set me off on this completely different path for which I'm grateful. And don't get me wrong, and I always feel the need to say this, although I'm sure, I probably don't need to. If I could have my old life back, complete with all its challenges and all my arguments with Mary Lou, I'd have it back in an absolute heartbeat and sack all this fun stuff off. But I can't. And that's one of the things that I've really learned when she died, that, you really can't change the situation, but what you can do is change how you respond to it. And that's what I've really embraced. I have felt for a long time that everything that happened surrounding Mary Lou's death, and there's loads that, we probably haven't got the space to go into today, but there's so much happened that I do feel that the whole thing was sort of very spirit led, like our spirit guides, even with me being on holiday, because that was, essentially really traumatic to be out of the country when your daughter's in intensive care. It was just awful. But it took me out of the equation. And I'm kind of grateful, sort of. I mean, I challenged myself with that in some ways, because on the one hand, you want to be there for your children, don't you? That's just natural. But at the time when all this happened, I was in a new job. And I mentioned before that, Mary Lou and I, we could be a bit sparky together. And because of the condition that she had, or that was sort of slowly evolving over the week, obviously we were in touch while I was in Lanzarote. So I know that she was fluctuating. One day she didn't feel good, the next day she felt better. And again, just being really logical and knowing myself. If I'd have been, I would have been due back in my new job on the 13th of January, which was the day she died. And I can imagine myself that week before. If had I not been on holiday, I would have been back the week before, after Christmas. I can imagine that we might have fallen out. I can imagine that I'd have been sort of saying, look, come on, are you sick or not? Do I need to go to work, or do we need to stay home and look after you? Are we going to the office? And as it was, we didn't have any of that. Although it was devastating to not be there, actually, my memories of that were just that we had very supportive and lovely conversations during that time. So I feel like the whole thing was very orchestrated by spirit. And a number of people, both before and after Mary Lou died, have told me that I've got very good protection in spirit. And obviously I feel that more myself now, because I know she's my key person. But even prior to that, people would say to me that I was very well protected spiritually. And that's how I look back at that period of time, realistically, that recognizing that it could actually have been worse.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And what was your relationship with grief like in those early days, and how has it evolved since then? Because I'm sure you're going to inspire anyone who's watching or listening who might be navigating the loss of their own loved ones. So it's so important to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel really lucky. I had a lot of good people around me. So I was able to really lean into the grief and just, I didn't put any pressure on myself. So sort of like all the things that you hear, or the thing I heard a lot was about being kind to myself. And at the time, I didn't really know what exactly that meant, but I took it to mean that I would only do what I felt like I needed to do. I was really lucky. So I said I've been in a new job. The boss that I had was fantastic. And because of the work that I was doing, we were in a position that I didn't really have any pressure. And he was just very much, look, you are the priority. Don't, he often used the word noise, just because he was very supportive when I spent a lot of time, as you might imagine, in those early days, feeling very guilty for not being here, and an awful lot through the what ifs. What if I'd not, what if I'd not been on holiday? What if, and that was with me for quite some time. And it's interesting because I just don't feel like that at all now, as I've just outlined, really. So that's one little message. If you are going through this right now, what you're feeling right now will change over time. You're not always going to be stuck in this, what can be a horrible place of those early traumatic days of grief. So so he would sort of say, look, just focus on what's important. And what was important some days was simply getting out of bed, or choosing not to get out of bed. And that was okay too. Totally took the pressure off myself. And as somebody who had, kind of spent their life really working very, very hard, always wanting to be busy, etc. It was difficult at times to sort of take the foot off the pedal kind of thing. But actually, that's exactly what I needed to do to get through. And another key thing that really, really helped, and this is a brilliant resource for anybody, was a woman called Dr. Lucy Hone. She wrote a book called Resilient Grieving. Lucy had lost her daughter probably about 5 years before Mary Lou. I think I lost a little bit of track of time. I think it might have been 5 or 6 years before. Her daughter Abby had died in a car crash along with her friend as well. Lucy was a resilience researcher. So she applied what she knew about resilience to her own situation. She wasn't particularly researching grief at that point, but that's what she then turned her work into. And one of the things, well, Lucy shared 3 key messages. I'll try and remember them all, but certainly the main one that I lived by and still live by now, and this will be my key message for anybody who's going through this. When faced with you've got to make a decision on whether you go to an event or, whether you go back to work or, whatever it is, you're making a decision about something. Just ask yourself, is this going to help you or is it going to harm you? Cut out. So if you think about what my boss said about cutting out the noise, it just cuts out all the noise. Is this going to help me? Is it going to harm me? So I use that a lot because, again, I've got a lot of good friends. So people would invite me out and I often didn't want to go. And I would literally think, well, is it going to help me or harm me to go? And if I was only going to please them because they'd asked me, then it was a no, I'm not going. Or if I felt that it was something that could help me, then I would choose to go. And it just stripped away all of that. Her other message was just kind of acknowledging that, shit happens, her words. And I got that right from the beginning with Mary Lou. I feel really lucky that I never once went down that why her, why me route. And at the time I took that to be because I'm a nurse, and I know that shit does happen because I've cared for people. So I feel quite lucky that I didn't go down that rabbit hole. And I forgot the third one that she recommends, but actually you're better off just listening to it. Lucy's got a great TED talk that went viral that year, the year I watched it in 2020. Definitely well worth a watch for anybody who's navigating the grief pathway. And then I suppose the other thing that I still do now, so I'm generally all right. I feel like I'm mostly okay. I'm definitely okay at this time of year. Mary's birthday was in October and she died in January. And I've definitely noticed a dip between October and January, the winter months. So as I move forward with my new work that's coming up, then I am hoping to try and slow down a bit in those winter months and just honour the seasons a little bit more. That will help me honour my grief a little bit more. And obviously, if those months don't necessarily fit with any of our listeners' grief patterns, but I suppose the point is just try and learn to listen to your body and do what is right for you in that moment. That's what I was going to say before. Yeah. So having said all of that, I am sometimes still sideswiped. Something will just happen. Some memory will come back to me and I'm just on the floor again kind of thing. But I'm able to pick myself up a bit quicker now. I'm not down for as long. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, that's for sure.
What do you wish more people understood about grief and how it changes us?
I think because a bit that's been like completely brand new for me. When all this happened, I remember sitting in a coffee shop with my boss, who was just so good, and we both sort of, and he's a medic as well, so we took a very sort of medical approach to this, and we both kind of like looked at each other and we're like, oh my God, I am absolute classic case for this being a PTSD sort of situation. Because she was young, it was unexpected, I wasn't here, blah 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 blah, and it's like, oh my God. And then that's a really weird thing with grief as well. So I remember this really vividly now that I've just said that. So when I would then start to then worry about me and what might become of me, I then felt awful, thinking, oh, why am I even thinking about me? I should be thinking about my daughter, not thinking about me. So your head is just all over the place with this stuff. And this I feel slightly uncomfortable because it feels really quite a bold thing to say. But what I learned early on, because I did loads and loads of reading, as you can imagine, was about post-traumatic growth and how actually through difficult situations, then people can actually grow rather than experience PTSD. And this is the bit where it's weird, I do feel a bit uncomfortable, but that's what I feel has happened. I've grown through this experience. And that is noted in the literature. It is possible to grow through grief. How it's happened for me, all the things that I said before, help or harm, looking after myself. I also feel blessed that I was led by spirit, and also feel blessed that I allowed myself to be led by spirit, because I could easily have blocked that rather than leaning into it. So I do think all of these things have helped me to actually see grief differently to how I saw it previously. So I suppose that if I'm still answering your question, the sort of the short thing is, whilst it is awful and nobody can take away that pain, it's it's the worst, but some good can come from that as well. And that takes some getting used to even be able to say that, but it can. I'm living that now. So again, like I said before, just being really, really honest, I really do believe that I've seen, felt and heard Mary Lou. There's no doubt about that. And in the same way, I would be being disingenuous if I now said that I'm not kind of okay most of the time, because I am actually, which doesn't mean I don't want it back, but it's just, it's the reality of living this change life.
Thank you. And what would you say to someone listening right now who is in the early stages of grief, maybe not spiritual, maybe just numb, and doesn't know how to begin healing?
Oh, look after yourself. Really go back to basics. So one thing I've thought about a lot since all this happened, and because I'm still teaching as well, it sort of feeds into my teaching, and it's just the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question, is thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you just try and look after your basic physiological needs. Try and drink plenty of water, eat as best as you're able to, keep warm, rest, all those really practical things. Just sort of think about it in terms of that hierarchy. And then, with your belonging, have you got people around you? Have you got the right people around you? That's one of the real difficult things for those who are navigating early grief now. And I've been reasonably fortunate in this regard, but not everybody, even in your close family and your friendship circle, will deal with the grief in the same way. And that can be challenging if you're doing things differently. But just know that it is okay to honour your own path, because you've got to look after you, and you've got to put you first. So as much as I think it's important to have people around you, it can also be important to not have certain people around you. If people around you are making you feel worse, so go back to that help and harm. It's the same sort of thing. If you've got somebody who kind of wants to help you, but their help is not what you need, then you think about what it is that you need, not feeding their need to be able to help you. For anybody who's going through this right now, just be so gentle with yourself. And by all means, reach out to me. I'm not a counsellor, but I am somebody who's walked the path and is very open to having conversations, and can perhaps try and point me in the direction of people who may be able to help, because it's just, it's tough. And I do want to say that it does get better, because I do think that you need some hope in that time as well. I remember really quite vividly in the early days for me, one of the things that really frightened me actually was I kept hearing with grief that actually year 2 was worse than year 1. And I remember thinking, how the hell can that be? How can what we've just been through? And it frightened me. And I put that out on a number of different social media groups, sort of saying, how does this work? And then with the answers that I got back, and then from my own experience as well, I think the differences in year 2 and also year 3 and the years beyond, then if you've had a really warm support network in that first year, then people do go back to their own lives, because that's just the way it is. So what I've sort of found, there was no way that year 2 was worse than year 1 for me, because how could it have been? I still, for me, nothing can be worse than that initial period. That for me was absolutely the worst. I think being prepared for the fact that year 2, year 3 and beyond might also be difficult, because you are not as wrapped up by your community, meant that I found my own community. So whether that was with online communities, or obviously for me, really by year 2, I'd found the tarot. So I found my spiritual path in year 2, probably more so than in year 1, realistically. But yeah, so my point of sharing that was for if anybody else has heard that year 2 is worse than year 1, I think my response would be, it doesn't need to be. And it goes back to something that I say frequently. I think I've already said on during this episode, that you can't change the situation, but you can change your response to it. So almost like if you expect year 2 to be worse, you probably can make it worse. But actually, if you hold on to the fact that it's going to be pretty difficult to trump what you've just been through, then with the right support, then hopefully year 2 might be just a little bit easier. Having said all that, this whole thing is not linear. In fact, so for me, one of my real challenging times this year was year 5, because finally in year 5, we got back to, so Mary died on Monday, the 13th of January, 2020. This year we had Monday, the 13th of January again. So the week leading up to that, I relived day to day all those conversations that I'd had. So that caught me off guard 5 years later. But again, like I said before, what I notice now when I'm caught off guard, I've got more tools in my toolkit to try and help sort of steady that ship again. I use meditation a lot, so that's something I've not mentioned yet, but one of the things that really helped me, and that was really, I didn't do that from a grief perspective, I did that as part of my development. But then that's become a real self-care practice for me, to be able to just notice what is going around in my head. You don't clear your head of thoughts, but you notice what is going on in your head. So that might be something for those new sort of to this grief pathway that they might want to explore. But more important than that, find something that you normally like to do. And then this is something that I share in my coaching actually as well. So I do sound healing, and I do yoga nidra, and we do a lot of journaling. And I always say to the people who are in my groups, if this isn't for you, then thank you for being here and trying this. But actually, is there something that you used to do before you were facing the challenges that you now faced, that you really love to do? Is there something with that you can get yourself back into? So that might be an invitation to some of your audience. Is there something that they used to do many years ago that they've not done for a while, that this might just be an opportunity to try that again, just gently, just with baby steps, and with no pressure and no expectation. But yeah, hopefully that might help a little.
I'm sure it will. Do you believe, well, the question I've got in my head is, do we ever stop healing, especially when I feel like the loss never truly goes away? I'm just curious about your point of view.
So you say, do we ever stop healing? Do you mean like
healing? Do we ever stop healing? Well, for me, I feel it's like ongoing process, and then the loss. Well, I lost my mom. It will be 3 years in October, and it keeps coming in waves. And I feel that loss, like losing her, never goes away. It's somewhere in the background. But then I found ways of like carrying on and finding my purpose. I'm just curious, what's your perspective on healing? Because emphasize the need of healing at the beginning when we are going through the grieving process. But I'm curious, what's your view with the years? Well, we carry on living here. Like, do we still heal? And yeah.
Yeah, and definitely. I suppose for me, it's sort of happened naturally that I am absolutely continuing to practice my own healing journey because I'm now helping others. So I suppose I've not really thought about your question before because I've just done this really naturally, because you can't help other people heal unless you're still doing the work yourself. I suppose if I wasn't doing this work, I might have not thought about it. And actually, it does need to be something that's ongoing, but you do it in a way that feels right to you. So I suppose until you ask the question, then I don't consider myself to still be sort of actively healing, if you like, but equally the practices that I now engage in and that I get joy from are healing practices. So I think it's a way of just sort of recognizing that you're not going to be okay after. Hopefully you're going to feel a bit better as the years roll on, but it's not linear, and it's okay to suddenly not feel okay many years later. But hopefully during that time, you might have found some ways in which you can feel better in that moment. And I think, so I do a lot of mindfulness practice as well, which I think can really help you just get back into that moment, and knowing that whatever you're feeling now, you might be feeling differently in the next hour. So that's something I got used to in the early days as well, sort of recognizing that even though I might get up and feel really, really awful in the morning, I might actually feel better by the afternoon, or I might have had a good news. So you're not necessarily having good days and bad days. It might be good hours and bad hours. And again, going back to your question about healing, as you were asking the question, what came to my mind was, and I'm sure you'll have seen it, there's a lovely image of this whereby there's like a ball of grief in a jar, and the ball sort of stays the same size. The ball itself doesn't go away, but your life expands around it. And that for me sort of depicts that post-traumatic growth that I mentioned before. So if you pick away at all this, I'm still as devastated as I was, but because I've managed to build a life around that, and because of what, like, the sort of the non-profit organisation that I've set up, because that's in Mary Lou's name, and we can't all do that. And I've said to a few people recently, please don't feel that you need to set something up in your child's name. A lot of us are drawn to doing this, and it's the right thing for many of us. But equally, there are other ways that you can honour your child as well. But what I like about Mary's Place is that I do get to talk about Mary Lou pretty much every day, but not in a sad way, not focusing on her death, but just in enough of a way that I've had my little fill of, my ball, whilst also living quite a fulfilled life as well.
So could you talk more about Mary's Place, because it's such a sacred and beautiful, tribute to your daughter's life and to yours. So what inspired you to create it, and what was that soul nudge that told you this had to be born?
Yeah, that was, I genuinely can't remember the absolute beginnings of it, because it feels like it started almost right at the beginning. I'll have it in a notebook somewhere, but I'm a bit scatty with notebooks, so I don't do them in date order. So presumably I'll find it somewhere. I just knew that I wanted to set up something called Mary's Place, and the name itself, obviously from her name, Mary Lou, and I deliberately didn't want it to be Mary Lou's Place because she wasn't a very showy person, and it would have just, that would have been too much about her, if you like. But Mary, perfect. Mary Lou and I, both Bruce Springsteen fans. He has a lovely song called Mary's Place. It's actually an original by Sam Cooke, but Bruce re-recorded this after the 9/11 tragedy over in the States, and for the Rising album. So it was a really uplifting song, and I've loved it since then. Kind of meet me at Mary's Place, a couple of different lines. How do you get this thing started? How do you live brokenhearted? There's loads of little lines within it that just mean a lot to me. And actually, more importantly than that, Mary Lou saw Bruce for the first time when she was 6 years old at a concert, and he played Mary's Place. And I can picture her. I know what she was wearing. She had a lovely little blue dress on, and she turned to me and she said, "Mummy, he's playing my song." So whilst it wasn't necessarily a particularly favourite song, it was an important song. So I was always going to set up something called Mary's Place, and I can't carbon date that bit of it. Then because of the tarot, so I got into doing tarot readings for people. I also, not long after that, I learned to do Reiki. I still do some Reiki now, not as much of it, although I'm going to be picking that up again in the next few months. I learned body massage. I had to go with reflexology. I didn't particularly continue with that, but I sort of was dabbling in all these different holistic practices. So at one point, Mary's Place was going to be some sort of like healing centre, and that's what I had in my mind, and I could see it really. And I was thinking, even if I can't do all of these things, I can oversee it, and I can have people coming in, preferably people who are quite new to reflexology. And then, I can be sort of overseeing. So I've got an idea of what they're doing. So there's a little bit of quality control. So sort of almost like bringing the day job into how I was conceptualizing how this would work. So that was in my mind to do something like that. Then I mentioned to you before that when Mary Lou first died, I was in a different job. I was in a research manager's job. I then went back into teaching. And I was teaching some year 3 nursing students, and I've been teaching them for about probably a couple of months by this point. I think it was towards the end of the semester, and I was in a lecture room with them. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but they were just really enthused and excited about becoming registered nurses. And I just recently read a report that said, a vast number of these newly qualified staff would leave the profession within the first 18 months because they felt so unsupported. And it was like literally in that instant, I know what Mary's Place is. We support newly qualified nurses to make the transition from being student to being professional. It linked perfectly. So I'd been doing my PhD before Mary Lou died. The academic research I'd been looking at had all been about transition and liminal spaces. So I was already sort of working with that from an academic perspective. So that's the academic bit that underpins what we do at Mary's Place, navigating transition. And then it's not the only thing that's changed since then is that when I started talking about what I was planning to do for nurses, I've got a friend who's a teacher who said, "This is the same in teaching, Julie. They're also leaving. Let's do this for teachers." I then spoke to a friend who works in law. It's the same in law, which was lovely because Mary Lou was a law graduate.
Yes.
So it just kind of it tied that together. I haven't progressed that part of the business yet. So basically, as I set up the CIC, so we're a community interest company. So the community is newly qualified professionals, and then we work in projects. So we primarily work with nurses so far. I'm just about to start working with teachers as well. And I've got a couple of sort of irons in the fire about working with solicitors. And I've worked with allied health professionals for that matter. We've worked with physios and occupational therapists. Because my big vision with this is that because I'm not for me, but for those individuals who participate, for those new graduates who are feeling really lost at work and they just don't know whether they've made the right decision or not. I think it'd be fantastic to get these new professionals in a room together. So the nurses, the teachers, the allied health professionals, the medics, the solicitors, and obviously this is completely untested, but I think there will be real power in them recognizing that actually, whilst my job is difficult, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to have to do what they do. And oh my God, thank God I'm not a solicitor. I don't want to have to go to court. And, and just sort of like normalizing those fears and helping them recognize that actually they train long and hard for the job that they wanted to do. And maybe it's not that they need to leave. They just need to take a bit of time out to look after themselves. So that's what we do at Mary's Place. The misnomer at the moment is we actually haven't got a place. So I often sort of say Mary's Place is in your heart, and we take Mary's Place to places at the moment. So I work with a number of different hospital trusts in England delivering wellbeing days. So we'll go, and there's usually between 50 and 20 new starters. I'll do a little bit of an introduction. We'll make the room all nice for them. It's typically a clinical room that we've just made nice with some fairy lights and some incense, and just change the energies a little bit in the room.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have some coaching conversations about what's coming up at the moment, what they're finding challenging, etc. They're really nice, relaxed days to allow them to get to know each other a little bit as well, so they don't feel so alone, because obviously community is such a massive part of assisting with transition. And then we might do a yoga nidra, or we might do some physical yoga. I'll bring a yoga teacher in to do that, because I can't do that bit. My sister, Julie Bilboe-Crane, she's a trained Zentangle expert. So this is like mindful drawing. So we've done some Zentangle with the staff. We'll always do a sound bath, because I'm a trained sound healer now, and I've got all that equipment. We do a sound bath, and they're just really beautiful days that allow the staff just a little bit of time to pause and to rest and connect with each other. We also offer one group coaching, should that be required, and we work sort of not just in trust, so we do independent days as well. The coaching is usually independent at the moment, so it's still early. We've been going for 2 years. The feedback we've had so far has been phenomenal. It's been better than I could ever have wished for. I feel really confident that we're doing the right thing. We are doing something that is required, and what we are doing is meeting the needs of the people who need it. That's not to say that we can't change and do things a little bit differently. I always say to the people who attend, a lot of what we do at Mary's Place is based on what has supported me, a 55-year-old woman navigating grief. Many of them are younger than me. What is it they need? So I'm really open to, if somebody says, actually, do you know what, Julie, why don't we try blah, blah, blah instead, then we'll do that. In fact, one of the last days that I ran at a hospital, in the feedback from the one prior to that, somebody had said, could we perhaps go and do a walk in nature? And in this particular hospital, there were woods nearby. So we did that over lunch. We just sort of took a little walk, and I gave them some things to, like, sort of mindfulness sort of things to think about. And it was a beautiful day. So yes, that just sort of shows how we do our best to do what to meet the needs of the clients, essentially. It's beautiful for me. It's lovely. It's really lovely to be able to provide that support to these newly qualified individuals, and to more experienced staff as well, because that's all the feedback that I've had, and I absolutely hear it, that actually we need to support experienced staff as well. So I'm sort of reframing the language a little bit. But with the CIC, you've got to have a fixed community. So if I make it too broad, I'm not really sticking to the remit of the CIC. But actually, if we frame it in terms of, we support experienced staff, because then experienced staff, they then support newly qualified staff. So actually, there's no reason why they can't attend the wellbeing day. So that's sort of how we play it, which again just sort of shows. This has been the nice thing, being my own boss. I can just be flexible and respond to what's required.
I absolutely love it. And I love your energy. And it doesn't happen often. I'm a healer myself, and my hands are absolutely boiling. They're just like so heated, which always happens when I meet another strong healer. So I know with your beautiful energy, you help so many people with that spiritual aspect. Well, with every aspect of your job. But I just wanted to acknowledge it's just so beautiful. Do you have a vision to have at some point one place for Mary's Place? I love that concept that you're able to take Mary's Place wherever it's needed, but what's the vision? Do you envision having something in one place, or?
Possibly. Shall I share something just to sort of put it out to the universe, kind of thing?
If you could, because I'm seeing clairvoyantly certain things, but we have free will, so I'm asking. Yes, that's the nudge I'm getting, to dream big and set intentions.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm sort of working on something at the moment. There's it needs to be the right place. So again, and this sort of goes back to the grief thing. What I mustn't do with Mary's Place is make it hard work for me. Is this going to help me or harm me? So
course.
Everything that we do, yes, I'm helping other people, but I've got to bring it back to me as well. Is it going to help or harm me?
Mm-hmm.
So the best place for me to have Mary's place, the most logical place would be to be in a city centre. That means me travelling 45 minutes every day to get there. I'm not doing it. That is not
Mm-hmm.
going to light me up. I am not going to bring the right energy there. So I need to find a place that's local to me. And I've possibly found somewhere with the absolute perfect address as well.
I think so. Well, I'm seeing something, but yeah,
Okay.
keep me posted because I know it's going to happen. Well,
Yeah,
the energy will be equally beautiful as it is with you taking your energy to all of those places. But yeah.
yeah, and I'll still do that because it's in, again, listening to feedback, it's really important. So at the original days that we ran, they were at a lovely healing centre in Birkenhead in Merseyside, absolutely gorgeous place called Healing Time, and we ran a few days down there, and it was lovely, and the people who came loved it, but I was finding it quite challenging and not really energetically good for me to be spending my time trying to sell for free, because the places were essentially free, to sort of sell these places that I was then paying for. And what I realised that actually it's sort of better, at least while staff are getting used to going to these kind of things and looking after themselves. So, because in a way, if you don't know what yoga nidra is or a sound bath, why are you going to spend your well-earned day off doing something with people that you don't know, doing something that you don't know quite what it is? So actually, running the independent days was lovely because it sort of proved that people enjoyed this stuff. But it was important then to start working with hospitals and to be able to offer this as part of the work day, or at least within the workplace. So sometimes it's been part of the work day, sometimes it's not a work day, people are on a day off, but they're going to a familiar venue. So I will carry on to do that. It's absolutely fine. But I do love the idea of just sort of having that little that place, partly because it's in the name, because it just sort of seems like the jigsaw, but also for me to have a bit of a base where people can drop in, with a message out. And of course, like for me, Mary's place is my CIC, but also I have my coaching business as well, Julie Bilboe Coaching. So that will also be a bit of a base for that as well, because basically what I do with these two things is it's the same me. It's the same me using the same skills, just sort of for different people. So I can kind of advertise both things, and for me to be able to go to work in Mary's place feels very, and it makes me very energetically happy.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Well, I'm curious, you've already mentioned a little bit, but you were in academia for many years. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about like what gaps were you seeing when it came to supporting people in those vulnerable early professional years? And if you could talk a little bit more about the importance of transitions, not just in career, but in life. What kind of transitions are people going through and when they come to you?
So just going back to that first bit, because it's really, really important. And I think if you're not in these professions, you might just not realise just how difficult it can be for newly qualified staff. In fact, I'll talk about nursing, and then if anybody is listening from other professions, they can draw from that, rather than me speaking about a profession that I've not really got the expertise from. But say from nursing, and I can say that because I've been a nurse for 37 years, so we were not really brought up or encouraged to look after ourselves. We were encouraged to look after our patients. Our patients came first, and I'd never have thought about looking after me or self-care. It all sounds a little bit fluffy, and no, you just we're practical people as nurses, and we buckle up and we get on and we problem solve and we make things happen. And we know that the job can be difficult at times, but we're nurses and we've chosen to do it, and we'll get on with it. And that is kind of the ethos. So imagine that then as a newly qualified member of staff. And I'm finding now that younger people are not as accepting of that mindset as I would have been in my early 20s. There are many more opportunities now for young people to do completely different things and not to find themselves constrained by rules and regulations. And it's almost like whatever you might think about that is the way that it is. So even if you're somebody who thinks, oh, well, it was better in the old days. Well, we're not in the old days anymore. This is where we are. And it breaks my heart really when I hear of like my people who come to Mary's Place saying to me that it was a story that I've told a few times now, but a member of staff who had just done night shifts on Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. So then that would let them into Monday morning, and then they were due back on a long day on Tuesday. Now, for any nurses listening, you actually won't be surprised at this because this is like pretty normal. I was horrified. How can that be right? To do 3 night shifts, come off for one day, which would be a sleep day. Well, I don't even think they have sleep days anymore. And then be expected to be back on a long day on Tuesday. This individual was absolutely exhausted. And, and I just sort of said to her, I said, have you told them, like, maybe because a lot of the off duty or, kind of how we work our rotas now is generated electronically. So I said, perhaps somebody didn't realise, did you tell them? And she'd just been told, look, this is the way it is. You're a nurse, get on with it. And then when I shared that little story with an experienced nurse, this came out at one of our wellbeing days, actually. And the experienced nurse, who obviously trained at the same time as me, but had stayed in nursing, and she said to me, she said, that is normal, Julie, that's how it works now. And I said, well, it might be normal, but that's not the way that it should work. Because they're just going to leave. Then they're not going to put up with that in the same way that we did. And why should they? There's got to be a different way of doing this. And I actually took the conversation into class as well with my third years. And it was just interesting because for some of them, they would like to do their hours in such a compact way like that. And then, because obviously they do get days off eventually, then they'd have some days off together. But for other staff, that would have been the straw that broke the camel's back completely. I can't do like this. And I think the thing is, if they're just being told that this is nursing, this is how you have to do it, we just have to get on with it, then if you don't feel that yourself, you're not going to feel part of that profession. And therefore, you're going to think, well, this profession isn't for me, and I'm going to go. And given that they've just paid to do their training and incurred God knows what in terms of fees, etc., that's the bit that I find really hard to take. So I went off on a bit of a rant then. But I suppose what I was meaning there also is that what we've absolutely got to acknowledge is that healthcare staff right now are exhausted. Before the pandemic, there had already been significant funding cuts. So they were already at a low ebb. And then to go through the pandemic and then come out of the other side of that, whatever that looks like, still with funding cuts, people are truly, truly exhausted. They haven't got the bandwidth. And I'm not speaking for everybody, because actually I do know a lot of staff who are being well supported as newly qualified. So in a way, Mary's Place, we are still there for those individuals, but I'm looking after the ones who are working in areas where they haven't got that support. So for those newly qualified who are working in areas where staff are just exhausted, and also importantly, they weren't looked after when they were newly qualified either. So there is that kind of little backstory of, well, I never had this when I was newly qualified, I just needed to get on with it. And that's the other layer of what's happening at Mary's Place, is I'm kind of hoping that the individuals that have been with me and with Mary's Place, when they become managers in 4 or 5 years' time, because they've been looked after, they will know that the best way to retain staff is to look after them, because it's not rocket science. It's just sort of changing culture, which is challenging. So that was the first part of your question. Then your other part about navigating. Did you ask about navigating transitions in general?
Yes. Well, in life, not only in career, but in life, yes. And what type of transitions would people be going through when they come to you, to Mary's Place, or to receive support?
That probably lends itself more to the coaching side of the business, really, and people that that I've worked with from a coaching perspective. A lot of it has been career based, actually. So a lot of life transition, whether that's a promotion, whether that's a career shift, whether it's retirement, all those really sort of big transitions. And then the other big one is relationship change as well. So relationship breakup, divorce, etc., all massive life transitions that what I think is lovely with the clients that I work with, I tend to work with people when they've come through that transition. So they've usually gone
Mhm.
through whatever it is that they've been going through, and then they've kind of come out the other side and are thinking, well, I'm free of whatever it was that was holding me back, but I actually don't know what I want to do next. Where am I going now? And I use a lot of different techniques in coaching, particularly now that I've sort of done my ILM training. So I've now gone back to this. All started as a spiritual practice, building on my years of being a nurse and an educationalist, and not exactly a coach, but sort of using coaching techniques informally. Then moving into tarot coaching, then sort of going round circle again, the ILM
Mhm.
executive coaching, but I bring in my if the client is open to it, then I bring in my spiritual practices as well. And that's where the tarot can be really helpful, just to sort of spark some ideas for where somebody might go next, and to perhaps unpick a little bit about what might be holding them back from making that next step. So yeah, so the main transitions that I work with really are mostly work stuff, be that promotion, job ending, retirement, early retirement as well, or people wanting to do something different and then going to part-time. So that's another, obviously it's a bit of a less of a transition, but it can be quite a nice stepping stone for people. And I noticed that a lot, just doing not so much coaching but just tarot readings, the amount of times that kind of came out, that was actually the next logical step, and people just walked away thinking, wow, that was, again, not exactly rocket science, but it just gave them the clarity that they needed to be able to see what their next actionable step is. I think sometimes if you try and push people too far in that early stage of transition, they just kind of close down and think, no, it's not for me. So it really is about meeting them where they are. Some of my clients actually just really need to rest, which is where the sort of the sound healing and the nidra comes in. They just need to rest, let it be. It'll all happen in good time. Let's not force anything. Got a couple of clients at the moment. Certainly one of them finished work six months ago, and she's just needed to rest. And whenever I've gently spoke about what might be next, she's not ready for that yet, and that's fine. So we just do the sound stuff, just allowing her body to settle. So it's equally, I've got action takers as well who are just ready to go, and it's that's really quite nice too, just being able to see them fly. So I'm
Thank you.
excited
I've
for
got two last questions.
that. Okay.
I could talk long, but I will not keep you here for too long. Well, one thing I'm very curious, do you share your spiritual side with the staff you're supporting, training, and with the nursing students, or do you keep it apart? I'm just curious whether it has evolved, anything.
Yeah, increasingly so. So it's so at first, I was very, very, very clear about these two things being separate. It just needed to be separate, and that there's part of me that, so if I was writing a proposal for a trust, I would not be talking about using tarot cards, because unfortunately, as much as I love my little deck here, I'm not frightened of them, but some people are, and I respect that. But what I have done consistently at the Wellbeing Days, and I've heard people talking about this, and I love it when I hear them talk about it, I will take oracle decks. So I've never taken tarot cards, but I've taken oracle decks, and I've also actually created my own little, not really an oracle deck, but a little deck of wisdom, sort of for Mary's place, with little messages. So I take those, and I will get them to choose a card, and I just leave the oracle decks on the side. But the amount of times I've heard people say, people who've been to repeat sessions, sort of showing somebody new, oh, come and look at these. This is the best bit. Come and look at these. So it's really cute. And I talk about it a little bit when I'm doing an introduction. I may or may not mention the tarot itself, and it's a shame, really. But that's just because of the baggage. As people get to know me, then I'm very open then. But it's just I play it by ear kind of thing. So I don't hide anymore, for sure, but I don't necessarily broadcast it, depending on the audience.
Of course. And finally, well, an idea has just popped into my mind. I was to ask you about the final message you would like to leave the viewers and listeners, but perhaps you would like to pull a card or two from one of the decks as a
Oh, yeah.
final message. But it's entirely up to you the way you would like to go
No, no, lovely. I'll
around.
pull one from each actually. Let's do one of my little Mary's Place ones first.
Thank you.
These are just, you can't see what I'm doing. But, okay, this is a very practical one. Okay, but I'm presuming you know what it's like. I always say this, whether it's these cards or whether it's tarot cards. I trust in the magic of the cards. So, and it says, so this must be a message for one of your listeners, or for yourself, perhaps, Marta. Remember to relieve the tension in your neck. So really, really specific. Most of them aren't like that. I'm going to share another one just so you can sort of see the difference. Give yourself a hug. You did the best you could. So there's a little variety in them. So going back to the fact that I always believe that we've chosen the right card, I think somebody here in the audience needs to have a little think about how their neck is feeling. You know, we do carry so much tension here. What is it you need to do to try and relieve that a little bit? So these cards are, and this was to make me smile, really. And a good friend of mine, Claire Lily Tarot, so she's a tarot reader. She helped me design these, and they're sort of structured like tarot cards, but people don't really know that. Only with minor arcana. But that green one that you just saw then, so that's one of the physical cards, so a bit like pentacles. There's blue ones that are a bit about knowledge, so a bit like swords. There are pink ones, which are compassion, so they're your cups. And there's sort of like lilac-y ones, which are about your energy. So, of course, that's your wands.
I love it.
Actually, I'm going to draw from these. These are... I've got just a teeny weeny deck of majors that I use.
Thank you.
Let's see if we can see what's coming up collectively just to close this lovely session. Temperance. Okay. Really, really nice. I mean, do you know what? That is lovely because to me, just intuitively, that makes me think about Mary Lou because she was a Libran. So it's all about balance, and the little image there just sort of shows that as well. So I guess the message for the listeners is, where do you need to find balance in your life? Where have you been doing too much? Where have you been giving too much of yourself and perhaps not taking back? And also another little message with temperance is, because I use this quite a bit in coaching, where are you holding yourself back? You know, temperance can be a card of caution, which is great. So maybe it's about, you know, so if I'm working with somebody who is, or if your listeners are really running ahead with something, just take a step back, just briefly. Have you dotted all the I's? Have you crossed all the T's? But equally, if you're holding yourself back, maybe this is the card just to say to you, asking the same question essentially. If you've dotted all the I's, if you've dotted all the T's, why are you still holding yourself back? And this is how I love the cards as a coaching tool, because you can interpret them in any which way to try and help the client really get to what the important thing is for them. And that's before we've even started looking at any colours or images or things like that clients may or may not choose to do. So there you go. So I think overall between those two cards, it's definitely about looking after yourself, isn't it? Give yourself a hug, look after your neck, and think about where you need to get some more balance.
Thank you. And finally, how can people connect with you? And I'm going to add all of the links to your social media and website in the description, but anything you'd like to share about how can people work with you and where they can find you?
Amazing. Yeah. So Mary's Place is pretty straightforward. So for any newly qualified professionals, so if you're not a nurse, not a teacher, but you're a newly qualified professional, connect with me because we'll see where this will go. I am leaving my full-time job at the end of July, so I'll be, very up to different ideas then. So we've got a website, marysplace.co.uk. We are on Instagram as Mary's Place CIC, and we will soon be on TikTok because my students keep telling me that's where I need to hang out. So that's where I'll be next. I have to say that fills me with fear, but And then so if you're not a nurse or not a newly qualified teacher, or a professional, but you want to connect with me from a coaching point of view, I'm on Instagram as Julie Bilboe Coaching. Not too much there for you to see at the moment, because again, this is sort of starting up for me again really now. You'll also find me on Facebook as Julie Bilboe Coaching and Sound Healing. I think you'll see from the way that I'm talking about this, I'm also on this evolving journey as well. And because, so really, I sort of started with the Julie Bilboe, or we were called Mary's Place Tarot Coaching. That then took a little bit of a back seat while we got Mary's Place off the ground, and now it's time for Julie Bilboe Coaching to come back in. So yeah, feel free to connect with me. I would love to hear from anybody who has listened to the episode, and if you've got any comments, I'd love to hear those as well. So thank you, Marta, for this opportunity. I've really, really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you, Julie, from the bottom of my heart, for sharing your story, your strength, your softness, and your soul with us today. I really appreciate and I enjoyed that conversation as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to all of the viewers and listeners. And I just want everyone who is listening or viewing it to remember that your journey doesn't have to be linear. It's not linear. Your healing is sacred. And even in the heartbreak, you're still worthy of joy, connection, and peace. Until the next one, goodbye, everyone. Thank you.